people can learn new technologies, right? So a developer, a software developer, doesn't just know one language and that's all they're going to know. And in fact, it's one of the strengths is that you can kind of pick up new languages, learn new languages, bring new things in. And the same with anybody in the kind of technology stack or anywhere along there. And I think that goes to the thing. So I'm looking in the chat here. So I still see Bill Hammond talking about companies being worried about adopting new technologies, thinking, well, what if it doesn't last? Which is definitely, especially as you get into this kind of more bleeding edge stuff that we've been talking about with containers and serverless. You can bet on this new technology and then it goes away. But I think the trick is not to focus on the technology, but on the ability to use technology. And so, you have to be able to kind of try, okay, there's a new technology, we're going to try it out, we're going to use it. If that doesn't play out, we're able to switch to another thing. We're able to kind of, move to a new technology. There was another one of our ex-Thoughtworks colleagues, Gregor Hope, had a tweet a week or two ago that I really, really liked, which was basically, and this was about companies worried about getting locked into a cloud vendor, and I think it applies to technology stacks and all that. And he said, lock-in isn't the thing. What you really need is velocity, right? So it's the ability to move quickly, the ability to learn and unlearn. That's what you really have to do. So I always, advise clients who are worried about the lock-in to a particular cloud vendor to say, look, you need to make sure your people get used to working in the cloud. That whole mindset shift that we've been talking about, learn how to use the cloud, and that knowledge works across clouds. They all are very similar in the basic patterns of how they work and all the kind of technologies. And the new technologies that are coming in, like they'll learn that and they'll adapt. And but make sure to encourage that. If you really lock people in and sink them into, well, we're using this old technology stack because that's what we've been using for 10 years, then you're screwed. About application-driven infrastructure. So not a separate team building the infrastructure that I think somebody might need to use, but the applications team saying, I need this, and then having that product thinking, having somebody saying, okay, we can build you the pieces that you need at the right level, or provide you the pieces that you need to put together at the right level of abstraction for yourself. And so when it gets down into how does that translate into, I guess, the people, my people who are doing the infrastructure as code, I think they'll be working in those teams potentially with different tools than they're working with right now, making reusable infrastructure components that are a bit more dynamic. And I've talked with folks. I talked with folks at a European bank that I don't think we worked together, Barry, but I was with them a few years ago. Around the time that we were together, I went and visited them. And I've caught up with them a year or so ago, and they had kind of done this. They had kind of invented basically like a Pulumi type tool in-house. And it was interesting, the way that they worked was they found that they couldn't have just like, say, sysadmins who are using these kind of infrastructure as a code tools or what have you. They couldn't have just developers. They needed both, because they needed people who knew how to develop real software and do all the testing and all that kind of stuff. And they needed that domain knowledge of infrastructure. And so I think that will be the sweet spot. You'll see these kind of teams emerging that combine those bits of knowledge. Talk about infrastructure as code, the kind of Terraform and that kind of thing. We're typically working with code that is basically, it's a wrapper around the API of the cloud, and it's dealing with very low level stuff like here's a server, here's a networking structure, here's a storage device. So it's very, very low level stuff. It's really kind of still sysadmin level stuff. And then with containers, the cool thing was I think it's the abstraction of the applications, right? So a container is a way of saying, I'm going to package up my application. And not only am I going to package up my application, I'm going to package up the dependencies that it might need from an operating system. So it's like an operating system. I really don't need the operating system. I don't need to think about, know much about what it is anymore, other than having a kernel to get, a little deep here. But it just means that, like, as a developer, you can just kind of package up build what you want and package it up and not have to worry so much about the rest of it. And then serverless takes that even further to say, look, I don't even worry about building a container and thinking about what the operating system and all those kind of things are. I think all that is still very nascent, right? It's still, there's still a lot there that, like, you don't get. So it's always a promise. And this is one of those things, maybe it's the inverse of that. we've got a new technology, we're trying to make it work in the old way. This is like, we've got a technology and we're kind of thinking, oh, great, this is going to solve all the things. And then it's like, well, it turns out there's a lot of things around that we still have to think about. So you get people kind of building up, say, Kubernetes clusters, essentially by hand. And so they have these snowflake clusters, that they can't manage very well. It's just like an old server. So, okay, it's a cluster, it's great. You can deploy your applications or package them. You don't have to care about it. It's the people underneath who are running that cluster, going back to the days, there's still those kind of systems administration types, the ops types or whatever they are, who are like, oh, we have to kind of deal with this mess down here, because it's a really cool level of abstraction and it's really cool pieces, but there's some other pieces that haven't quite emerged yet, or there's too many offerings of those pieces. You have like, your service meshes and you have all your kind of deployment tools and all these things that are coming out. And it's like, which one of those do you bet on? So it's all very fast moving and a bit chaotic in a fun way, but maybe a fun way for me as a technologist, maybe a little bit less fun for some folks, certainly for your CFO. Right? I used to care about, am I buying HP servers or Dell or Supermicro or what have you? What operating system version am I putting on there? Like, that was like my life, right? And even like, network switches and things like that. I want to get the cool new networks. Now I don't care about that stuff anymore. It's just like, it's just not my problem, and it doesn't make a difference. And it's a kind of a burden that I can shed. And so we've got to move up that stack, right? And I think, there is a careful point there, because obviously then you get into the vendors who are like, we're going to sell you a PaaS product or what have you. And, it'll do all the things for you. And you can very quickly get into, I'm not going to name and shame any kind of vendors here, but there are some products where it's like, say, a collection of open source things have been put together into a great, it does everything. Here's the PowerPoint that shows you all the things, but it's kind of like taking, your open source software and pouring cement into it. So it's like, you can't touch it now. Or actually, better yet is Lego and the Craggle, the super glue. It's like, the cloud is this awesome box of parts, of pieces, Lego pieces that you can assemble the way you want. And so many people are like so keen to like, well, let's get somebody to kind of super glue a bunch of Lego pieces together and give it to our developers. And then it's like, well, what do I do with this monstrosity, right? I need to pull this piece out and I can't. So yeah, that was a bit of a, like, you have to kind of be very aware of like, what are the things that I care about and want to have control over? And what are the things that like, I just am really happy not to have to think about. So I mentioned before, like Terraform and those kind of things are very low level, right? They're kind of sysadmin thinking about what are the pieces, the individual Lego pieces, let's say, of the 2x4 bricks and so on. But like I said, developers, like, that's now, I don't want to spend time thinking at that level, right? So what I'm starting to see is these patterns where you have the teams who are building, pieces, using the infrastructure as code tools, building reusable pieces that developers can then use. And I think what's interesting and where we're going is, and I think, I think the kind of things that you all work on, and that I've seen a few people building, or a lot of people building in-house, this kind of thing of how do we build these components for developers to use? Do we have like a language where they can write, like, say, a YAML file and say, I need a database, I need, a server pool or what have you. And they don't have to think about how to wire all that together, but you kind of provide them the pieces that makes that happen. And so then how do you do that in the way that gives them, so you have the ability, again, like I said, to make the golden path, or to have the people in-house to say, we need something special, so we're going to build that. So this is what I think is exciting. This is where I see things going with all of this infrastructure as code. I don't think developers are going to be, I do see people saying, oh, developers, well, they'll be using Terraform and all that. They need to kind of have access to all that stuff. And I think some teams will probably want to have that level of control. But like for a lot, it's like, I don't want to have to deal with that.
Yeah, I think finding the right abstraction level is one of the key challenges in there, right? And it might be different for one team to the other. It might just differ.
Exactly. So I think providing the variable abstraction levels, I think, is the key thing. As saying, like, yeah, we can give you the it's in a box ready to go, Lego spaceship, Millennium Falcon, or we can give you stuff that you can kind of like pull the pieces off and you can get as low down as you need to. Yeah, I think that's the key.